Hamas has upgraded its weapons arsenal. The terrorist organization now holds about 10,000 rockets and missiles. Hamas produces most of these weapons inside Gaza, but many of them come from Iran. Hamas rockets endanger about 40% of Israeli civilians.
Israel says it's going to step up its offensive in the Gaza Strip as rockets launched by Hamas terrorists penetrate deeper than ever into the country. Israeli fighter jets, attack helicopters, and armed drones have hit more than 500 targets in the Gaza Strip over the past 2 days. Fighting in the region has intensified in recent weeks, and tensions over the killing of 3 Israeli teenagers and apparent revenge killing of a Palestinian teenager. Tom Rogan, an American political commentator and columnist with the National Review, joins me now. Now, Tom, this is the largest military offensive we've seen, really, since 2012. Your reaction on what's going on right now?
Well, I think what's happening is that the Israelis have just had enough. There were tensions in Netanyahu, the Prime Minister's cabinet, last week. But now with the Hamas rockets continuing, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, there was very little that they could do, I think, apart from respond militarily. And now that they have decided to respond militarily, I think they've tried, or they are trying, to alter the strategic dynamic on the ground. And that means that they really have to launch a concerted operation to take out senior Hamas leadership figures and their military infrastructure in the Gaza Strip.
Now, let's keep in mind Hamas's headquarters. It's in the basement of a hospital right now. They have their stockpiles buried underneath schools, hospitals, mosques. You know, what is Israel supposed to do to defend themselves without trying to kill civilians here?
Well, this is the great difficulty, because for Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces are a professional military force that wants to avoid civilian casualties for both moral and strategic reasons, whereas Hamas, for both moral and strategic reasons, wants its own people to die. This is a simple fact. There's videos that the IDF have released, but there's, journalists on the ground have reported on this, that Hamas uses human shields. It sets up in universities to make bombs, hospitals for command centers. And the difficulty for the Israelis is that ultimately, because they are concerned with human life, which we have to remember is the whole beginning of this operation, to protect their own citizens, but because they're concerned with human life, both Palestinian and Israeli, there will be some targets that they are not hitting. And that's what's happening at the moment. They're selectively targeting facilities because they do want to avoid civilian casualties.
Israel used to have troops on the ground in Gaza. They unilaterally pulled out. Do you think that we're going toward, or Israel is going toward a time when they could actually, put more troops back in on the ground? Of course, they've amassed, I think, 40,000 troops already.
Right. I do think we're now looking at a ground incursion. The degree to which where that will go, I'm not sure. I suspect it may be pushed towards the tunnels with Egypt, which is a key support network route for Hamas. But the degree to which they go into Gaza, is up in the air. But I do think they will send a sizable number of ground forces in. Because the signs on the ground, mobilization reserves, there's a National Security Council meeting that happened just a few hours ago, and the rhetoric coming out of that strongly suggests that they are preparing for a ground operation.
I want to ask you about your president, because, his special assistant, Philip Gordon, he's a White House coordinator in the Middle East, made some comments a few days ago that might suggest that he's actually not on side with Israel. I'm just going to read them to you. It says, "How will Israel remain democratic and Jewish if its attempts to govern the millions of Palestinian Arabs who live in the West Bank? How will it have peace if it's unwilling to delineate a border, end the occupation, and allow for Palestinian sovereignty, security, and dignity? How will we ever prevent other states from supporting Palestinian efforts in international bodies if Israel is not seen as committed to peace?" Using language like occupation, your thoughts?
Well, look, the administration has always been deeply skeptical, I think, of Israeli politics, of Israeli politicians, certainly Likud, the Israeli government led by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And these comments just flow in that vein. The problem, though, from my perspective, is even if the administration has its political difficulties with the Israeli government, this kind of rhetoric is so deeply unhelpful in terms of building a strong, functioning and relationship that actually both sides can give an honest exchange of viewpoints. It doesn't help that. It's sort of petulant and silly, and to my mind reflects a foreign policy that has just descended now into little more than absurdity. And I use that word. It sounds like, rhetoric for the sake of rhetoric, but there's no, what are people supposed to take from this? It really is confusing, and I think from the Israeli perspective will be, it will destroy the kind of connection points that are already, greatly frayed.
Do you think that, Hamas is obviously focused on Israel right now. Why are they not focused on other Arab regimes? Do you think we could actually potentially see in the future Hamas allying itself with, ISIS, for instance, which is a much more expansionist force?
I think it would be unlikely that they would ally themselves with ISIS purely because ISIS is so, ISIS takes it to another level in terms of authoritarianism. They would want Hamas essentially just to become, they would take away their command, infrastructure. But, Hamas, it's a very good question because, the great myth is that Hamas, the Lebanese Hezbollah, are resistance fighters. But Palestinians are treated exceptionally badly in states like Lebanon and Jordan. And there's very little uproar. The reason for that is that at the core of their identity, these groups, and something that unfortunately Obama and his administration doesn't understand, is that they are virulently anti-Semitic and they hate the West. They hate democracy. Social dissatisfaction does play into some of their support. But in the end, look at the rhetoric, the Hamas Charter, talking about the protocols of the elders of Zion. It is hugely anti-Semitic. And when we delude ourselves to something else, when we pretend that's not the case, I think we do grave strategic disservice both to ourselves and our allies, like Israel.
Tom, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.